What's up guys, Xygor here. You know, throughout the years there's been many amazing RPGs released, the Final Fantasies of the world, the Dragon Quest, many of which I've covered, but among those are also some weird and odd and obscure RPGs, some of which use odd gameplay dynamics, aesthetics, and things like that. And that's what this video is going to be dedicated to. I'm going to show you the 5 most odd and obscure RPGs of all time. But before I do that, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below what you think is the most odd or obscure RPG you've ever played. And now, let's get into the 5 most odd and obscure RPGs of all time. Coming in at number 5, we have Emerald Dragon for the Super Famicom. It was released with an English translation patch. This game is odd and obscure for several ways, including the gameplay, because the battle system is something I've never seen from an RPG, and also the story is pretty unique as well. It uses some Zoroastrian mythology as its basis, and there's many other interesting elements to it, so let's take a look. In Japan, RPGs were one of the most popular genre of games in the 1990s. The Super Famicom featured a huge number of them, over 100 in total. However, only a very small portion of those ever reached North America, a market that hadn't taken to the genre yet. One of those that never landed stateside was Emerald Dragon, a game that North American gamers totally missed out on. Because the title wasn't published by either Squaresoft or Enix, it was also much more obscure than it otherwise would have been. Thankfully, like several other RPGs I've covered, this game has a complete translation patch, which originally surfaced in 2008. Thanks to the good folks at Translation Corporation, non-Japanese speaking North American players can experience one of the most overshadowed RPGs of that era. The story follows Atrushan, a dragon born to the dragon world. At the beginning of the game, he and his group of friends notice a girl shipwrecked near their home. She can't remember anything about her past, but the dragons befriend her and name her Tamarin. As they eventually discover, dragons can't exist in Tamarin's hometown, but Atrushan gains the ability to change into human form and gives his horn to Tamarin so that she can call him when in danger. The adventure takes off from there, with the chief adversaries being the army of demons that threatens the world. The story uses a few familiar tropes, but overall, I thought it was actually very original. There are certainly unexpected twists and turns, and interesting character development, and the game doesn't present itself as a ripoff of any other RPG. It's really its own thing. The game features a huge world full of NPCs, items, and storyline development. One of the most standout facets of Emerald Dragon is the large character portraits that accompany the game's dialogue. They stand out stylistically from about every other RPG I played on the system, and were a great touch that other games could have adopted. It sounds simple, but putting a character's words next to their face really does a lot to develop their character, and also gives the player an outlet to better understand the story. These portraits didn't reflect changes in emotional state or anything like that, but they were still refreshing. The way in which they were used reminded me a bit of the Lunar games, and I say that as a big compliment. As far as combat goes, this one is definitely cut from a different cloth. Battles take place in an overhead grid, with a unique bar-based action system. All actions in combat, whether movement or attacks, drain a bar that appears at the top of the screen. When it's completely depleted, the character's turn ends. Even each individual step on the battlefield map takes a small portion of the bar, so you have to plan your movements well more than anything else. Attacks occur merely by running into enemies. You don't have to choose to attack them from any menu. There isn't too much complexity to the battles, but Atrushan does gain the ability to transform into a dragon and utilize some special spells that are really powerful. Unfortunately, Emerald Dragon limits itself a bit by only allowing you to control Atrushan, as his other companions are all controlled through artificial intelligence. If you ask me, this is probably the game's biggest defect, because combat ends up feeling automatic and monotonous. If the combat system wasn't as unique as it is, I dare say the automation part reminds me a bit of Draken, and that is not good. The soundtrack had some really interesting fantasy-oriented tunes, and it really strikes me as a laid-back score overall. I don't think it'll blow you away like Nobuo Uematsu's best work would, but it's definitely a pleasure to listen to. As a whole, Emerald Dragon was a very fun RPG. Its storyline is probably its best aspect, and the character portraits really made you care about and identify with the characters. The combat, while appearing quite novel, unfortunately suffers from player inactivity, but if you can get over that, you'll really like this one. For the number 4 most odd and obscure RPG, I chose Paladin's Quest for the SNES. This game features an odd visual presentation that's like no other RPG I've ever played, has a fairly unique combat system, and a really interesting story that doesn't use fantasy elements. It actually features futuristic elements and aliens, so let's take a look at Paladin's Quest. By 1992, the RPG genre had pretty much hit its stride in Japan. The Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games reached a mass audience that loved the fantasy-oriented atmosphere, dramatic stories, and strategic combat both series offered. This dynamic caused a small developer called Asmik to try their own hand at the genre in 1992, when the Super Famicom was exactly 2 years old. Teaming up with publisher Enix, they created Paladin's Quest, which aspired to be bold and do many things differently to set it apart from other RPGs. In Japan, it was known as Lennis, Kodai Kikai no Kyoku, or Memories of an Ancient Machine. The game's story centers upon Chesney, a 13-year-old boy studying at the magic school on the planet of Lennis. One day, his buddies persuade him to climb the nearby tower on the eastern edge of campus. With a friend named Duke, he eventually reaches the top, where he places his hand into an odd, hand-shaped device. This unfortunate decision activates an ancient machine called Dahlgren that unleashes a wave of destruction. When he wakes up, Chesney realizes the magic school was completely destroyed in the process, and soon learns that he's the only one that can put a stop to the ancient machine he empowered unknowingly. I have to say that when I first played through this, I immediately thought of how thematically similar this was to Secret of Mana's intro. What with the whole innocent dare causing the release of a sealed evil upon the world bit. Throughout nearly the entire game, you control Chesney and Midia, an aspiring female spiritualist. In addition to these two, many other characters join your party, and you can even hire special mercenary characters in pubs throughout the world. There's over 12 characters in all, but you are limited to having 4 characters in your party at one time, and you can only equip the 2 main characters with items found throughout the game. The first thing, and I mean the absolute first thing you'll notice when playing this game, is that the developers were going for a completely different aesthetic. The colors are bright and cartoony, and really stick out if you compare them to the darker or more serious RPGs from this time. Also, the buildings look like, well, something from a carnival or an alien universe of some kind. It's so incredibly different from anything else on the SNES that it almost appears as if this title was on another system or something. In one word, it's just weird, but I do find the people that really like Paladin's Quest, and there are some that do, always point to this facet to justify their opinion. Combat is the part of the game that will probably be most familiar to fans. It's a turn-based affair with a first-person view like many other games, but the interface is, bulky and awkward. I really don't like how the menu text obscures everything behind it, and I think the game could have really benefited by limiting the menu to a certain portion of the screen rather than using the entirety of it. Each round, your characters can choose to attack an enemy, cast a spell, use an item, defend, or run. Probably the most unusual aspect of Paladin's Quest is that spells, rather than consuming magic like most RPGs, actually expend hit points instead. This means that healing can only be accomplished through items, which does annoy me a bit. Spells also increase in power the more they're used though, so at least the system was innovative to a certain degree. The spell effects are definitely a little corny, and not well animated at all. Just take a look at this fire spell. It's pretty rough even for this time. I would never claim that spell effects are ever the most important aspect of any game like this, but it does show a lack of attention. As a game typical of its era, there are a lot of random encounters, and some of the dungeons are pretty long and grueling. The odd structures in the game also make it difficult to determine where you're supposed to go at times. Like the Breath of Fire games, this one also suffers from having to use so many abbreviated names for weapons, spells, and armor because of character limitations. It's totally frustrating. North American gamers may be surprised to find out that Paladin's Quest has a sequel, Lenis 2 Fui no Shito, or The Apostles of the Seals. That game has a similar visual and thematic style, but is much better tuned, has a far superior battle interface, and much better graphics. It came out in the summer of 1996 in Japan, long after the prime of the SNES. There is a translation patch available for it, and if you like Paladin's Quest, I think you're guaranteed to like that one even better. Overall, I just can't recommend Paladin's Quest in the same way I would recommend many other RPGs from the period. It's filled with quirks, oddities, and irritations that will turn some players away, even those that are retro RPG fans. The music and story are the title's saving graces, but the individual characters aren't that lovable, and its odd visual style and combat menu interface will turn other fans off. And, as far as I can tell, the game, despite its title, has nothing to do with Paladins at all, and Chesney and Midia certainly aren't. As to how the name was decided upon, I have no clue, but it may just have been some kind of marketing tactic. Notwithstanding some of its issues, Paladin's Quest still has some appeal to RPG fanatics that never got a chance to try it. If you still want to give it a go, keep this one in a lower tier of your RPGs to play. And if you thought those two games are weird, wait till you get a load of the number 3 most odd and obscure RPG, Chaos Seed, for the SNES/Super Famicom. This one combines feng shui elements with resource management, an action RPG, and simulation characteristics. So let's take a look. Ever run into a game that was nothing like you expected, but its utter uniqueness blew you away? Well, that is exactly how I first reacted to Chaos Seed. In 1996, Taito released the game in Japan at the very tail end of the Super Famicom's run. The game was developed by Neverland, who also created the Lufia series. Chaos Seed went mostly unnoticed to North American gamers, but a translation patch was thankfully eventually released to allow English-speaking enthusiasts the chance to play. The overarching storyline of Chaos Seed is pretty basic, but incredibly unique. The game is set in a mythical country based on some aspects of an ancient Chinese dynasty. The player takes the role of a docent, a mystical apprentice that maintains a network of caverns underneath the earth. The caverns control the livelihood of the planet, and if their balance is disrupted, all life nearby begins to wither away. Those who maintain the caverns are at odds with the surface dwellers, though, because the latter mistakenly believes that the caverns are the source of the pandemic. At the beginning of the game, the main character is trained by an overseer to protect the world by creating enchanted caverns. Soon after taking the plunge into cavern stewardship, though, the hero runs into a dragon. The dragon teleports the hero to several parallel dimensions, and from here forward the game is presented in a series of scenarios that each have their own independent story and objective. The crazy thing about this game is that I'm not really even sure what genre it fits into. It's something of a mixture between an action RPG, a simulation, and a strategy game, but even that combination isn't even the best way to describe it. In fact, Chaos Seed managed to steer clear from almost every stereotype imaginable for a game by offering such a unique premise and playstyle. And the game should definitely be commended for that, if for nothing else. Each scenario in Chaos Seed involves restoring a cavern network, and most of the game takes place in the caves themselves. Enchanted caves have to be constructed by the player through a series of tasks. Each individual room in the cavern is assigned one of the 5 Chinese elements: earth, wind, fire, wood, and metal. The player is given vast control over the purpose of each room, and prospective functions are determined by the room's element. In the first scenario, the player must gather 1,000 energy and place it into the dragon vein in order to find success. When breaking into a new room, you often have to fight your way through a bunch of rocks or packs of enemies, using action-oriented commands to deal damage. Your party has set hit points and magic points though, and you can quickly be overcome by large packs of enemies if you aren't careful. Unlike many of the other games on the system, you can also move in 8 directions as the game incorporates diagonal combat. Creating caverns requires the player to think about the types of rooms to build to conquer the game's challenges. For instance, one use of the rooms is to produce energy and sentan. Think of energy as resources to build rooms, and sentan as resources to upgrade them. Each of the different room types can be upgraded to provide additional assistance toward the end goal. Some of the other rooms have other functions, such as extracting items that help progression of your character, producing monsters to assist you in your party, and a room that lets you visually observe what is transpiring in the other rooms. Chaos Seed is honestly very complicated to learn, but the game does provide an intuitive tutorial that helps quite a bit. The game forces you to strike a balance between creating and maintaining the caverns, all the while forcing you to deal with monsters and enemies that attempt to crowd into your enchanted cave and destroy it. The action-oriented combat in Chaos Seed is really fun, but it takes some time to get used to. The game allows you to execute a series of attacks with power of various degrees, but each attack also has some drawbacks. There are also some spells you can cast to assist you. The graphics in this game are really great, truly some of the best that the system had to offer. The sprites look awesome, the animations were really well done, and the colors are just very vibrant. Because Chaos Seed was released so late in the Super Famicom's run, maybe these things were to be expected, but the graphics are definitely on par with games like Super Mario RPG and Star Ocean. The music in Chaos Seed uses Chinese and electronic influences, and it really is quite unique. It reminds me a bit of the soundtrack from Destiny of an Emperor on the NES, but with better quality and much more diversity. I found the soundtrack really great, offering a large variety of distinctive styles that you won't find anywhere else. Chaos Seed certainly provides some impressive challenges and an immense length, an average of 60 hours for a playthrough. This makes it one of the longest Super Famicom games ever released. Undoubtedly, the game offers a lot of longevity and replay value that many of its counterparts on the system just couldn't match. In fact, there's just so many exceptional facets of this game you can't find anywhere else. Since Chaos Seed came out so late in the Super Famicom's run, and it was never released in North America, it simply didn't get the exposure it deserved. Thankfully, with the English patch available, fans can revisit this gem today. And now we've reached a whole new level of odd and obscure, because at number 2 is GOD, Growth or Devolution, for SNES/Super Famicom. This one is an RPG that uses sci-fi elements, odd dialogue, and a modern setting. And there's a lot of weird elements to this one too. And oh yeah, there's also aliens in this one. Let's take a look. Among the massive array of Super Famicom RPGs that were never released in North America, several games stood out. Seiken Densetsu 3, Final Fantasy V, and Star Ocean all gained critical acclaim, and helped make the Super Famicom into the greatest RPG console ever released. However, some RPGs really flew under the radar for a variety of reasons, and were quickly overshadowed, forgotten, and left virtually unknown in North America. One of these was GOD, or Growth or Devolution, Heed the Call to Awaken, which came out in Japan in 1996. This one was created by the tiny developer Infinity and was published by Imagineer, and almost no one I know has ever seen or played it. The game was unplayable to most of those stateside until 2018, when a translation patch was released. Thanks to dynamic designs, all of us English-speaking RPG enthusiasts are now able to sit down and finish this one. The translation is truly awesome too. Its loads of humor and creative word choices make clear that those who created this patch poured immense time into it, so as to ensure players had a great time playing it. I've left a link to it in the description below in case you want to give it a try. One thing that leaps out immediately about this game is its modern setting. The year is 1999, and you play as a teenager named Gen, who is on summer break from school. On the way to his grandfather's house in Hokkaido, he runs into a group of bullies led by the Brat Boss. After defeating them, he climbs a mountain, where he discovers a hidden passageway with a mysterious bat. When he defeats it, the earth starts to rumble, and aliens. Yeah, that's right, on the cliff of the mountain he observes the approach of 3 alien spaceships, which unleash a firestorm of destruction upon Japan. When he awakens 10 years later, in 2009, he finds that everything around him has changed. And that is where GOD truly takes off. For its time, the story was definitely innovative and sets itself apart from everything else on the SNES. I mean, come on, Gen lives with his mother and wears a red baseball cap. Truly, we've never seen this before in any other game I've covered. In another novel concept, the main character utilizes a bicycle for transportation and can ride through towns with it. This concept too is entirely unique. GOD's story has Gen traveling to distinct locations in the world to find special objects, which was also a daring and exceptional plot device. We haven't seen it anywhere else. And then, unlike any other RPG ever created, the game features a confrontation with the teenage gang, something never before done in any game of this type before it. Beyond that, GOD uses an alien attack and invasion as a critical story element. This choice was so bold that no other developer would have risked everything to try it. In all seriousness, GOD borrows heavily from Earthbound. In fact, almost every trope in the game is seen in this one. Playing the game for even 30 minutes makes it pretty clear that it could be accused of being a direct ripoff. It's not a total one-to-one copy, but its thematic similarities to Earthbound are striking and immediately noticeable. In a way, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword. People that aren't Earthbound fans may find a lot to dislike about GOD, but people searching for another game like Earthbound may find it in this one. Throughout the game, you recruit 5 additional characters, with 3 being permanent. Heath is a mysterious former military man with a knack for physical damage. Mina is the ostensible leader of a religious cult with great psychic ability. Basil is an inquisitive monk that travels the world in search of the true meaning behind the alien invasion. All of the characters fall into typical RPG archetypes and have their own personalities. As far as combat goes, this one uses a pretty traditional system you might expect. Players enter commands for each of the characters, and battles unfold through a turn-based system. Unlike many RPGs, your own characters appear at the forefront of an over-the-shoulder, first-person perspective. It reminds me a lot of the Phantasy Star games, and I really like it. Battles flow pretty quickly, and both the combat animations and sound effects are great. I also love the fact that getting new weapons and armor actually changes the appearance of your characters, which certainly makes GOD stand out from other RPGs in that era. However, I will say that the random battles of the game are very frequent, even for an SNES game, so players that prefer the ability to avoid battles may not like this facet. Level ups in GOD are very significant, and even a single level or two can make a world of difference when it comes to plowing through enemies. As you level up, you also gain new psycho skills, which essentially acts as magic in the game. The equipment system also works well too. The menus are simple, and there's a quick option to equip the strongest equipment, which helps streamline the gameplay. The factor that's truly unique about GOD is the chakra system, a class change framework of sorts that allows each of your characters to progress in different ways. With the discovery of each god stone in the game, you unlock a new level of chakra. New tiers of chakra unlock special abilities that can be acquired through Cosmos stones, which are obtained after battles. Eventually, you also gain the ability to link 2 chakra together, which opens up lots of possibilities. For instance, some nodes allow special combat attacks, the ability to gain health and magic after battle, and even amplify stat gains upon a level up. The system works pretty similarly to what can be found in Final Fantasy V, where you can arrange special abilities for each of the characters. In my eyes, this system was really effective. The fun that comes in changing your abilities to find out what best suits you is one of the best aspects of GOD. The game's soundtrack is also quite fun to listen to. It's a huge collection of 52 tracks, which don't seem monotonous and also add a lot to the experience. I describe it as mostly upbeat, with lots of horns and percussion. The songs are definitely well placed in the story, and do a lot to alert the player that something uplifting, foreboding, or miserable is about to happen. Overall, GOD is a ridiculously overlooked RPG that's well worth playing. Those that don't like the modern style may find fault with it, but there's enough in it to make most fans enjoy it. The menu navigation system and quick battles make the game hold up well compared to many others of its type, but the random battles are super frequent and a bit too much for my liking. The battle animations, quirky story, soundtrack, and progression system are its most redeeming aspects, and you'll definitely appreciate the awesome translation. GOD can definitely be criticized for being too similar to Earthbound in some ways, but it still provides enough fun of its own, especially through the chakra system. It's absolutely worth playing if you're a retro RPG fanatic that's never tried it. And the number one most odd and obscure RPG of all time is on a whole new level, because this might be the most odd and obscure game I've ever played, let alone the most odd and obscure RPG, because this one is egg focused. It's an RPG based on eggs. There's crazy comedy, silliness baked into it, odd real-time strategy gameplay at times, and it's Hanjuku Hero Let the World Become Soft-Boiled for the SNES Super Famicom. Let's take a look. The 1990s was a time when strategy RPGs dominated the console landscape. However, real-time strategy games that were super popular on the PC at the time, like Total Annihilation, Warcraft 2, and Command & Conquer, were almost nowhere to be found in the console universe. One exception to this was Hanjuku Hero, A Sekaiyu Hanjuku Nare, or Hanjuku Hero Let the World Become Soft-Boiled. It was a Squaresoft game released on the Super Famicom in Japan in 1992. Hanjuku Hero Let the World Become Soft-Boiled was actually the second game in the Hanjuku Hero series, a franchise that now has 5 games. It came out on December 19, 1992, which was only 2 weeks after Final Fantasy V was released. And this fact is honestly pretty telling because it was totally overshadowed by Squaresoft's flagship title. The most unfortunate thing about this game, at least according to this gaijin, is that it lacks a full English translation. All the translated versions, such as the one in the footage playing now, is part of an incomplete package that localizes only the bare minimum text and leaves everything else untranslated. I'll leave a link to the one I'm using in the description below, but as I said, it's pretty rough and it doesn't exactly help that much. The basic premise of Hanjuku Hero Let the World Become Soft-Boiled involves controlling units on a map in real time. Your goal is to use your shogun, the top commander, to capture fortresses and complete objectives. The overworld gameplay actually functions a lot like the Ogre Battle games, but when you clash with units you transition into a turn-based encounter. And let's just say, they're pretty darn silly. I mean, look at this, it's insane. Your units and the opponent's units basically launch their bodies at each other over and over and bounce off each other like they're running into a balloon or something. After you complete enough objectives, there are also boss encounters where you do get to provide individual menu commands, and these are the most intense. There are also cards you can use in this game to give you an advantage in battle, so you may think this title ripped off Ogre Battle. But actually, this came out 4 months before Ogre Battle. You can carry up to 3 cards at a time, and you can obtain them in castles, along with soldiers for the army. In addition, you can also acquire eggs that hatch into powerful summon monsters that allow you to defeat the bosses, and this is pretty cool too. I also like the fact that there is a timing system, so the seasons change over time and you're able to upgrade your castles and hire new generals at the end of each month. Santa even appears and gives you presents on Christmas, and you get bonus money on New Year's Day. I like these touches, and the fact that you can make adjustments every so often made it feel pretty involved. It kinda reminded me of SimCity. Probably the most interesting thing about this game is that the soundtrack was composed by legendary Dragon Quest composer Koichi Sugiyama, and I think it was the only Squaresoft game he ever created music for. His style is immediately recognizable too, and it's a big bright spot. So anyway, Hanjuku Hero Let the World Become Soft-Boiled is a really silly game on the surface, and the English translation is rough and unfinished. In fact, even if you play with the incomplete translation patch, you probably won't understand what the heck's going on most of the time. But if you can get over those 2 things, there's some truly fun gameplay to be had, and you won't find much like it on the console outside of Ogre Battle. Let's just hope this one makes Square Enix's list of games to remaster and bring to us in English form in the future. But for now, there's plenty of other SNES RPGs that do have translation patches that you should definitely prioritize over this one. So there it is, by far the 5 most odd and obscure RPGs of all time. This was a fun list to create, and believe it or not, there were many other zany choices I could have selected for this, but I do want to hear yours. Down in the comments below, let me know what you think is the most odd and obscure RPG of all time. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a YouTube member or Patreon patron to support my work and also get access to exclusive perks like advanced viewing of my videos. And until I see you guys next time, take it easy.